I'm Jack Ruderman with ReVision Energy, and I'd like to welcome everyone to this webinar here at Contemporary Automotive in Milford, New Hampshire. I'm here today with David and Audrey Hammer, co-owners of the dealership, and above us on the roof here is a large, state-of-the-art solar array that powers this brand new building. Before we talk about the solar power system, just a few words about ReVision Energy. We are a 100% employee-owned solar design and installation business with 15 years experience, and we are the #1 rated rooftop installer in the Northeast. We install systems large and small for homes, businesses, municipal buildings, schools, and nonprofit organizations. We also offer complementary technologies such as electric vehicle charging stations, LED lighting, battery storage systems, and high-efficiency heat pumps. So, enough about ReVision, let's talk about Contemporary Auto. Maybe you guys could start off by just telling us a little bit about your business and how you made the decision to build this new facility.
Well, the dealership started in 1984. Audrey and her dad opened it up in another location here in Milford, operating out of a trailer, and it's just grown and grown and grown, and our market area has changed. And several years ago, Audrey and I said, you know what, it's time to think about relocating, and we identified this piece of property and ultimately bought it. And I think that when it came time to design the building and build the building, we did a bunch of research, what we liked, what we didn't like, and we're in the business of selling cars and servicing cars. They generate tailpipe emissions. We can't apologize for that, but what we can do is we can try and offset some of that. And we felt that sustainability was an important part of the process, and it's a responsibility that we all share. But we also felt that it had to be economically viable. And so we went through a variety of different ideas and working with you specifically on the solar to make a decision on that. But we worked with other organizations to address some of the other things that we employed when we designed the building.
And what sort of sparked your interest in solar in particular as compared to other technologies?
Well, I think when we started down the whole planning process for the building, we knew about solar, but we didn't know a lot about it. And as David said, we wanted to offset what we generate, and then we started talking to our construction crew and the architect and asked them, did they think it worked in this application? And we got mixed reviews, but we kept pushing and asking more questions, and then we decided that it was the right thing for us to do, and we have plenty of rooftop with the new facility, so we tried to maximize that.
Sure. And what were your biggest concerns or hesitations about going solar?
I think initially everyone told us it wouldn't be economically viable, and the return on investment would be so far out there it wouldn't make it worth our while.
And the concern was, were we trying to catch a falling knife? Because as the price of these panels go down and down and down, do they continue to go down, or do they plateau and start to level? And it took us a little while to get comfortable with that. A lot of help from you, a lot of pushing from our college-age kids and their friends, and some of those. But also, it was important for us because economically, it's not just the cost of the system, it's also a terrific hedge against the price of electricity here especially in the state of New Hampshire, where the electricity is one of the highest in the country. We use a lot of electricity. It's a significant fixed expense for us, and it just made a lot of sense to help reduce our exposure to that. And we got comfortable that we weren't catching a falling knife, that really it was a good, from a timing perspective, it made some sense. I think the math, if I remember correctly, based on everything involved, whether it was the cost of the system, the various state level rebates, tax credits from the federal government, and the avoided cost, I think if I remember it was a 6 to 8 year payback on our investment. You know the numbers as well as I do, and that just made sense to me. And we're very happy we did it. It's actually really neat to know on a day like today, where the sun is bright and shiny, that we're we're giving power back to the grid as opposed to taking power off the grid.
Yeah.
And that's a good feeling. And it's fun to brag about it. I have that little app on my phone. I check the thing compulsively.
And the monitor that ReVision put in the showroom with the sign explaining about the rooftop system.
Right.
Customers really pay attention to that, and they,
Yeah, what
they
kind of
ask a lot of
reactions?
questions about it, and what does it mean, and how can you tell what you're generating, and they go beyond that, and they ask, well, what was it like in the winter, and what's it gonna be like for a year? And we haven't been in the building a year yet, so
Right.
we can't answer that, but as the weather has changed and we've gotten out of the winter season, like David said, every day he at least is looking at it. And we have some customers who come in, and every time they come in, they check that and they ask questions about it.
Yeah.
So there's really an educational component to it.
Yes, yeah.
I'm sure there is.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Sure there
Yeah.
is.
It's great.
And, people, we've been telling people about it because we're in the retail business where we're selling a commodity product, right? And you could go buy a Jeep Grand Cherokee from any number of dealers, right? And we're all gonna sell the same, at or near the same price because our cost is about the same. So we have to differentiate ourselves. And part of the decision for us was, how do we differentiate ourselves? Okay, we can put up a brand new shiny building, that's great, but what else? And that's when the desire and the need, or the desire and the emphasis to focus on environmentally friendly and sustainable practices, if they were economically viable, the more we got into it, the more we liked that. We've talked to people of different generations too, which is kind of a surprise, that said, you know what, you've done a lot of things that are important to me, and that shows that if you care about those things, whether it's the solar or putting on a tighter building envelope than we needed to, putting in all LED lights that we didn't need to do. We gather all the waste oil that we generate in the shop when we change people's oil. We store it in these big tanks, and then we use that to heat the entire building all year long, or during the winter. So we've eliminated the risk of that getting into a bad place. And then we've done things other than that too. But people have said, if you care about the things that I care about, you're going to care about me as a customer. And we felt that was a good way to try and differentiate ourselves in our market, which is very competitive. And so we have we've been pleasantly surprised by that. We've had people actually come to our store and bypass 4 or 5 other stores specifically because of those things.
That's great. And what do you tell people when they say, well, how much power are you getting from this? How much of your operation will this cover?
Well, what I do is I pull out my phone and I say, well, this is what we're doing right now.
Nice.
But in the month of May, for example, we generated 20 megawatts, which is collectively during the month, which was pretty exciting. And based on my understanding, that represented about 72% of our total demand. We have a net meter arrangement with Eversource. So on a day like today, where we're probably going to generate more than we consume, we sell back to them. And then on a day where, on a rainy day where we're consuming more than we generate, we buy from them. And then the bill that we pay is really just the difference between those two at the end of the month. And last month was our high so far, and that represented 72% of our total demand, which was exciting because my hope is that this month, because we've got longer days and everything else, it's going to be even more.
Yeah, it's a good feeling when you see that.
It's a great feeling, yeah. Especially when you see the bill go down.
Yeah, so Jack, we had a question coming from Facebook, which is a slightly nerdy electric bill question, but they were asking, does the solar affect the demand charge portion of their bill? So I don't know if you want to walk through kind of how you make a project like this work.
Sure. So when you get your bill each month from the utility, you have 2 types of charges. You have volumetric charges. So for each kilowatt hour of energy that you import into the building, you pay a certain amount for the supply value and a certain amount for the transmission and distribution. But there's also something called demand charges, and demand charges are based on your highest level of usage. Essentially, the utilities need to prepare for those days when there's maximum load on the grid, maximum demand for electricity. They've got to have enough power to meet that, and so they charge everybody a demand fee. And if you are able to reduce those days each month where you hit your peak, if you do essentially what's called peak shaving, you can reduce the demand charges. And one way to do that is with solar. Essentially, if you've got a hot day in August and the sun is shining, your solar system may be offsetting 80-90% of your load, or as David said, you could even be producing more than you need. It is effective at helping to reduce demand charges. It's not foolproof. There will be days when you have a maximum demand and the sun isn't shining. But in general, you do see some diminishment of demand charges with solar. Other questions from our listeners? Okay.
Well, plus I think too, when you look at the invoice, there's the multiplier that's driven by what your net consumption is, right? And as you look through that invoice, and by reducing that net consumption, the multiplier stays the same, but the amount of times you're multiplying it goes down.
Exactly.
So the dollars go down.
Exactly.
I mean, as an example, in January, our electric bill was $3,300 for 1 month. In May, it was $1,800. I mean, there's a dramatic difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Difference.
I've got solar on my own home, and in the summer months, there are bills that I receive where there's a basic customer charge, for $12 and change, and the solar, which is a fairly modest sized system, has taken care of the demand, so there are no volumetric charges. It's just $13, which is a pretty neat deal.
Just to relate those numbers, because people may not know, the building is just under 25,000 square feet. So
Right.
That's what those dollars in energy use relate back to.
And do you have a sense of how this building is performing with all these clean energy features you've got compared to your old facility?
So far, very well. The other building, like Audrey said, was about 14,000 square feet. This one is about 25,000. And I think our electric bill there typically ranged from $2,500 to $2,800 per month.
Mm-hmm.
We've got 11,000 square feet more. And other than the middle of winter, so far we're ranging at a lower number.
Fantastic.
Which is great.
That's a great result.
Yeah.
And the whole thing really has been an education process for us initially to make the decision to go this way, but for our customers, explaining some of the decisions that we made, and for our employees too. There were a lot of questions, even still, why did you do that? Or why do we have to do this way now? We've always done it. For example, some of the other energy efficiency or green practices in the men's and ladies' room, we decided to use hand dryers and no paper towels.
Sure.
That did not go over really well initially with the employees. It was like, I want paper towels. And we're like, when we explained why, begrudgingly they were all right, and now they're on board with things like that. That's why it's all an education and getting people comfortable with doing things a different way.
Sure. Change takes time.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, that's great to hear, though, because it sounds like over time there's an acceptance
Yes.
and an appreciation for.
We're still working on
what
some
you've done.
things.
It's a tug of war.
Yeah, we've got all dishes and ceramic mugs for the customer coffee machine and in the employee break room. And every so often we'll go in and there'll be a stack of paper plates that someone went out and bought, or plastic
Right.
cups. But
Right.
we're trying to convert them. So.
That's great. And when you were at the outset of the process, how did you decide to work with ReVision?
We were actually introduced to you by our architect.
Right.
And he spoke very, very highly of you. And honestly, we just called and we talked and we felt very comfortable right from the beginning. And I can tell you now because we're beyond it, but we actually didn't talk to anybody else.
Interesting.
At the
And refreshing.
architect's recommendation, because he had dealt with other solar companies and not dealt with ReVision, but had heard through coworkers what your reputation was, and he said, here's what my experience has been with people I have used, and here's what I understand the experience has been with someone I haven't. That's how highly he recommended you.
Nice, great to hear.
So,
And what advice would you have for business owners who might be listening today and are thinking, maybe I should look into solar?
It definitely, you've got to at least give yourself the opportunity to look into it. Don't just disregard it and think that it won't be within your budget.
Right, and you've got to get yourself beyond the complexities, because it's a new language for you.
Right.
It was a new language for us, and you got to force yourself to say, you know what, I'm just going to open myself, I'm going to ask the questions, I'm going to find out the information, and then I'm just going to do the best I can to make the business decision that you can make. I mean, you guys will lay out whatever scenario somebody wants to look at, so that makes it very easy, because you don't need to do the math yourself, but you do need to really understand what's behind it.
Yeah.
And you need to think in terms of your long-term strategy and the physical plant. You know, we were fortunate in that we were still in the design phase, so we hadn't made the decision to put solar on the roof when we were designing the building, but we thought we were going to at some point. And so when they were designing the structural steel, we said, make sure you put enough roof capacity to handle the load, so we didn't have to go back and reinforce the physical plant. And that was a very inexpensive, cost-efficient way of doing it at that point. Now, most people have a physical plant that's already up, so you need to retrofit it, and that has an impact, but and that's going to impact the cost. But I would argue, just like Audrey said, is just push through the detail and understand it.
Sure, and there is a fair amount to wade through.
Yes,
There's
yeah.
no doubt there, but on the other hand, it's not calculus.
No,
either.
it's not, and I also don't underestimate the impact that your customers, the beneficial impact that your customers will feel about whatever business you're in, will feel about the fact that you're taking that step to do that. And we've had people, friends of ours, people that are not even customers, just people we know, they thank us for putting that on the roof. Wow, that's kind of a surprise. And,
Yeah.
But it's a good feeling at the same time.
Absolutely.
So I think and it feels good to us.
And are you seeing any trends with your customers in terms of their preferences for vehicles and whether they're looking for high efficiency, high MPG, or electric hybrids, anything along those lines?
You know, we sell trucks and SUVs, so you have a lot of people primarily. We have a lot of people that ask, you know, what do we do? We have one car, our Pacifica, that's a plug-in electric hybrid, and we have our Fiat all-electric car. And I think people are asking and trying to understand, but it hasn't been it's an absolute must, I need to have that. But I think, you know, it feels like it's getting more and more important. You know, we've got our new Wrangler coming. It's not an electric hybrid, but it does have a regenerative turbo boost to it, which is going to be good, and paired with a smaller motor, so that's going to improve fuel economy, and you're not going to give up power as a result of that.
And I think one feature of the building that you may not have mentioned is that you have an electric vehicle charger out front, right?
Right.
Yeah, we've got two. We've got one out front that's open to anybody to use, and we've got one in our shop so that when we service vehicles, we can use that. And we haven't really broadcast that yet because we had when they installed it, it was just a little wobbly, and we didn't want too many people coming and pulling on it. But that's fixed now.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's there, and we welcome anybody to use it.
That's great. That's great. And so, any sort of concluding thoughts in terms of lessons learned from the experience?
I think probably don't be intimidated by it. Just ask the questions. There aren't any questions that are bad questions. And if you're considering the solar, you may come out the other side deciding to do it or not, but at least you'll have the information you need to make an educated decision. Again, it was the right decision for us. David mentioned, you know, if you're trying to retrofit, I'm confident that you would work, and maybe it would end up having to be a smaller system. I don't know, but I'm confident there would be a way to put in a solar system if you wanted to do that, if that was important to you, and you could make the numbers work.
Sure. And if you had the space, would you have considered a ground mount system as well?
Yes, but we didn't have the space because we
Right.
store vehicles. We
Sure.
need
Yeah.
we need the space for that, but we would have considered that.
And there's still more room on the roof.
Yeah,
We could probably put a few more panels up there.
Yep, and the technology keeps advancing, as you said,
advancing,
so there'll be a higher output typically from each new generation.
I think one of the
Panels.
unfortunate things for us about the system is that people can't see it
Right,
because of the
right.
design of the building. We've got a parapet all the way around, because when they do find out, they say, oh, it would be really great if we could see that. And
Right, and you do have some great drone footage.
Yes,
Yeah.
we do.
Gorgeous images, actually.
Yeah.
I mean,
There are ways to see it, you just can't physically see it when you drive by, so
Right.
sometimes people are surprised that it's there.
Super, all right.
Jack, do you want to talk about what is currently the state for rebates, incentives, et cetera, in New Hampshire, and then just generally, just so we have that out there?
Sure, absolutely. That's a great topic to cover. So right now, if you buy a solar system, whether you're a homeowner or a business, as long as you have tax liability, you get a 30% federal investment tax credit. So as opposed to a deduction, it's a direct credit, which reduces your taxable income by the amount of the credit. In addition, you get accelerated depreciation, and that means you can take off essentially about another 20 to 25% of the purchase price. So at the end of the first year, you essentially have cut your cost in half. In addition, in New Hampshire, there are state rebate programs that are managed by the Public Utilities Commission, and those rebates are available for homeowners, but they're also available for businesses and nonprofit institutions. And those funds are increasingly sought after as solar becomes more and more popular. And there's an annual allotment each year. So funding usually lasts most of the year, but there are some times when demand is so high that the program may close temporarily and then reopen. And then there's another potential revenue stream in the form of something called renewable energy certificates, or RECs. And those are essentially the environmental attribute of the clean power that you're generating. You get one REC for each megawatt hour you've generated. So this month, Contemporary Automotive would have gotten 20 RECs. And those RECs can then be sold. They're sold through a marketplace where there are buyers and sellers, and the buyers are typically electric utilities or competitive electricity suppliers, and they need to buy those RECs in order to comply with state clean energy standards. So you've got that as an additional revenue stream as well. And then I guess another point to make, Dave was saying earlier, this is, you have to look at this as a long-term investment, and that it's a hedge against rising prices. And what we find is that a typical business right now in New Hampshire is probably paying somewhere between 9 and 11 or 12 cents per kilowatt hour for the electricity they buy from the utility. If you look at the levelized cost of energy, or if you take the cost of the system, the solar system, and project out over the life of the system, which is 40 years, you're going to have a levelized cost of energy. You're going to be buying those kilowatt hours, locking in your price at closer to 2 or 3 cents per kilowatt hour. So over the long term, you have locked in a very stable price, and you've protected yourself against price surges.
Cool. And I don't know if we got it at the top, but do you want to give the pitch on Contemporary Auto and where, because I don't know if you mentioned physically where we are and what you offer, so
Sure.
before we close.
Yeah, we're located in Milford, New Hampshire. We're at the intersection of Route 101 and Route 13. Right off the exit ramp, you can't miss us as you go down the road. We sell Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, and Fiat new vehicles. We sell pre-owned vehicles. We service all makes and models. We're in a unique position in that we're the only domestic dealer in our market area. So we have a tendency, if somebody is driving an off-brand, we'll take the work and do whatever work they have to do. We've been here for a while. We expect to be here for a while. It's a very vibrant community, and for us, moving into this location, we're kind of the first one in, the trailblazer in a sense, on a pretty large ultimate development in this section of town. There's about 100 acres, and we're the first one in, which is exciting, and there'll be more built around us, which is even more exciting. And I think it's going to be good. We set it up to grow with it and not have to pull it along.
You can't see it here, but I can tell you, having toured the facility, it is a gorgeous, really state-of-the-art facility. And if you have a chance to check it out, particularly if you've got interest in solar, it's really easy to get here. It's just right at the intersection of 101 and Route 13 in Milford. So I encourage anyone who's interested to come out and check out the dealership.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you both for your
Thank
time
you.
today and for being pioneers with your solar system and with your clean energy building. You guys have done a phenomenal job,
Thank you.
and it's really
Thanks for that.
it's a great facility.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time today.
Sure.
All right.